Hello. So this video is going to be the next Disney one, obviously. It is going to be about Pocahontas, which came out in 1995. And I will go over at the end of the video. I am going to go over the historical inaccuracies between this one and the sequel. Um, and kind of say, yeah, this is what Disney did. This is what happened in real life, just to make sure that I cover my bases on that, because there are quite a few, unfortunately, historical inaccuracies in the movie. The very, very core idea of what they wanted to do with the movie is still there, and I will go over that when I get to development. So I am going to focus first just on the original movie, then the sequel, The Journey to a New World. Then I will focus on the miscellaneous stuff, which is basically just because there's House of Mouse, and then there's the Wreck-It Ralph stuff. There's not really a whole lot of other stuff that they did with Pocahontas. She's not in Kingdom Hearts, although that I think would have been fun. There was a Pocahontas video game, I remember, because I had it. It was just a game for the PC. I remember playing it. It was a lot of just like little mini games and such. But there wasn't really there's nothing in Kingdom Hearts that deals with Pocahontas. I think that she would have made a great Princess of Heart, but unfortunately she's just not there. They didn't use her. I guess there's always a possibility. There might be always the case of much, much later games where they could still use her, but they haven't done that so far. She's not even like a summon, or anything that has to do with her is even a summon um, in the games, which, they did all the other princesses up to that point for the most part, but they didn't do her, so oh well. And then there's House of Mouse stuff, and then there's Wreck-It Ralph stuff, and then I will do the historical inaccuracies. So I will go over those. I probably won't catch every single one of them, but I will try my best. So as I said, the movie came out in 1995. It takes place in 1607, which basically the first song of the movie, the Virginia Company, basically describes what's going on. It's the concept of course, that they've discovered the new world. It's 1607. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So this is 100 and some years later, and the Spanish and others have made their way to the New World, and now the British are starting to come over, and of course they're bringing lots of young men that are trying to seek their fortunes and have an easy life, soldiers, sailors, that type of stuff. And of course then there's also more adventurers and explorers and everything, which is where John Smith comes in. Then of course we have the character Governor Ratcliffe, who is more just, he's going there because he's a very greedy man. And in the Virginia Company sequence, when Ratcliffe is going up on the boat, we see the rats from Lady and the Tramp scurry up a rope at the same time to represent a rat is entering the boat. His name is also Ratcliffe, and he's also one of the two Disney villains that is actually based on an actual character, an actual person, historical figure. And Pocahontas is, of course, the only Disney princess that is based on a historical figure. All the other ones are made up of, Jasmine's a story, Little Mermaid, Ariel's a story, Belle's a story. All the other ones are based on that. But the other character that was a real person is Prince John from Robin Hood, which doesn't really have any bearing on this, except for technically, he's an ancestor of King James, who is the one who's sending all of the people to go to the Americas, the New World, as it's referred to as. Of course, he's more of a player in the second movie, and I'll talk about him a little bit in the second movie, but not quite yet. So yes, we're introduced to them. We're introduced to a boy named Thomas, who's going off because he wants to make a fortune, and he can support his family better. And of course they're sailing off and everything, and they were told by the Virginia Company, which is just a company, which is the name of the song is the Virginia Company. It's a company that's basically, we'll get a whole bunch of men together and send them off, and they'll dig up the gold for us, they'll do all the hard work, and then we'll pay them some, but then we'll keep most of the money. It's basically the concept. A lot of other European countries did the same thing in regards to that. They told them there's America is the New World is gold everywhere, and all you got to do is stick a shovel in the ground and you'll find it. That's not 100% true, but, the other European countries at the time had started to spread rumors and stories about, all this gold that they were finding, down in South America and the, Central America and such. And, how great how much gold they were finding so easily. But like they ship off, and then there's a storm, and Thomas, who's the kind of the young kid on the crew, gets thrown off the ship, and then John Smith has to rescue him. And John Smith's our leading man for the movie. He rescues him. Historical inaccuracies aside, the version of John Smith that is in the movie is a good character. As I said, I will go over historical inaccuracies at the end of the video. That'll be the last segment. So I guess if you want, you can always skip ahead to that, but I will talk about them because I do think history and context are important. But just for the course of the movie itself type of a review, we're just going to stick with what we're shown of the characters in the movie. Then we'll move on to historical inaccuracies. But, John Smith saves Thomas, and they all start to have fun and, be more friendly with each other and everything. And then, we cut to the New World, and we are introduced to the tribe of Pocahontas. So much of, her father's just returned from what appears to be, a battle crusade. And we're introduced to her father, who is Chief Powhatan, of course. Pocahontas is his daughter. So, she's the chief's daughter. She's our resident princess for the story. And she, she's very adventurous and free-spirited, and, we're said she follows the wind and everything. Very much guided by the wind like her mother. We find out that her mother is gone and has been gone for a while. Dead. And, Pocahontas and her father are reunited. We're also introduced to Pocahontas' best friend, Nakoma, and Pocahontas' two animal friends, Miko, who is a raccoon, and Flit, who is a hummingbird, which is why I have the hummingbird over here. Why I have the Picky Pecky over here, because I have a raccoon plushie, but it's at work. And I didn't have any other, raccoon or Pocahontas related things. So we get the book and the bird. But, we're introduced to them, and, we're introduced to the fact that, Pocahontas' father, although he's very happy to see her, he tells her that there was this young warrior in the battle that, fought so bravely and everything, Kocoum. And Kocoum has asked for Pocahontas' hand in marriage. In different societies, the idea of arranged marriages was not unheard of. Of course, it was a very big thing in Britain for higher classes and everything. And of course, in this, we have a little bit more of, he's a warrior. He's proved himself. Powhatan wants, wants Pocahontas and Kocoum to settle down, so that way Pocahontas stops being so wild and free. Not that he doesn't like his daughter being free. He just thinks that it would be good for her, that it's time for her to start settling down. So, we get that. We get the steady as the beating drum song, where he's like, the river is steady and calm and everything, and that, that's the important thing to have. And he gives her the necklace that belonged to her mother and such. It's kind of, it's like your mother was, this is what your mother wore on our wedding day, and then, now it's for you and everything. Pocahontas, of course, does not like the idea of having to be in arranged marriage with Kocoum. She thinks he's much too serious, much too, he is handsome, and he's, a very good warrior, which are important qualities to have in the society that they are in. Well, not necessarily the handsome part, but I guess that would help. But, he's just not a good match for her. Doesn't mean that she doesn't like him. It's just, he's just not what she wants. And of course she goes off, and, we get the whole, the reprise of, steady as the beating drum. And then we go into just around the river bend, which is where, she's like, well, the river's not steady. You can't step in the same river twice. And, so much of that, and how, it's not steady. It's not calm. There's life in it, and it's always changing. And how, her father says, it picks the path of least resistance, whereas, rivers go wherever they want. We have, I live in Nebraska, and we have the Platte River, and, over the thousands of years, millions of years, whatever, that the Platte River has been around, it has changed course at various points in time between flooding and, just other shifts in the geography and everything. Rivers change course all the time. And, and we see that, and we see her, she's singing, just around the river bend, and we get her contemplating over whether or not she does want to marry Kocoum. And, her fear is that, of course, it's going to be, that is all of my dreaming at an end. And in that case, I mean, I don't think Kocoum is going to be the type of husband where it's like, oh no, you marry me, you're not allowed to leave the tent, or you're not allowed to go and, leave the village or whatever, or anything beyond the defines of what I tell you to do. I think one of the also reasons that her father is kind of encouraging her to want to be with Kocoum is because, Chief Powhatan is a warrior king, and he wants his daughter to be protected, but he also wants his tribe to be protected. And having his, daughter marry this warrior that has proved himself in the last battle that they were in against, with their allies against whoever it was that they were fighting. It was another Native American tribe. And, he wants his daughter and his tribe safe. So you can see where he's coming from with that. But with Pocahontas, it's, she is very curious still about the world. About the world. She likes to follow the wind and everything. And we see her make her way to speak to Grandmother Willow, who is a face in a tree. I'm sure there's connotations there that I'm not quite catching, but, Grandmother Willow is nice, and, she's sassy. She's a sassy tree. There's I guess if you're going to name a Pokemon after her, it would be, I guess you're going to do that, it would probably have to be a Trevenant or something, and, you can give it a sassy nature and name it Grandmother Willow. Or just Willow. And, Pocahontas and Grandmother Willow talk about, Pocahontas had this dream, and she keeps dreaming about this spinning arrow, spins faster and faster and faster, and she can never quite figure out where it's pointing. And she thinks that it's going to point her down her destiny. And, Grandmother Willow, that's very interesting and everything. And she tells Pocahontas to, listen to her heart, listen with your heart, which is where we get that song. And they hear, the wind, kind of the whole thing of, Miko and Flit don't talk, but, Grandmother Willow does. And Pocahontas seems to be able to, kind of hear the wind, have the wind speak to her. Which is, kind of where that comes from. And, I like how they kind of do that with some of the Disney princesses. Sometimes the animals are more talkative, sometimes they're less talkative. It just depends on the movie, I guess. Because, Merida doesn't have any animals that talk to her. So, well, I mean, her mother's a bear, but that's a different story. I will do the Pixar movies at some point, which is where I will talk about Brave, but not yet. First, I got to get through all the Disney movies. Pocahontas hears something on the wind, and she, climbs at Grandmother Willow, and she looks, and she sees strange clouds, and it's, of course, the sails of the ship, and that's when, the ship pulls into harbor, and, all the adventurers, the settlers and everything are, ready to get off the ship to go and start, searching for gold and start setting up a base camp type of a thing, a fort. For them to have there. And they get there, and, Ratcliffe is, of course, just going to use them to get gold for himself. And, of course, Ratcliffe has his dog, Percy, and his assistant, Wiggins, who is adorable. And seems to be rather smart. He's also very good at gardening. So, Wiggins is, a smart character. A funny character. And, so we have Percy, and we have Wiggins, and we have Ratcliffe, and, Ratcliffe and John Smith seems to be at odds, which is where the next song comes in. we have, the settlers start landing, and, Ratcliffe's, names the area, in the name of King James, I name this town, this, area Jamestown, the whole, it's like, I put a flag here, therefore it's mine. Well, I put a flag here, therefore it belongs to whoever the flag looks like, which is, British flag. And of course, the men are okay with this because, now they get to start looking for gold. And, a lot of them are there to try to make their fortune, or, make a fortune and then send it back to their family, whichever the case may be. Which is, what happened a lot of the times. That's rather historically accurate. They would get tricked and used, and sometimes they would make a fair amount of money and everything, but other times it would mostly just go to whoever the main financier the main financier of the exploration was, which in this case is Ratcliffe. And so they whereas the song Mine, 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 which is where we get a dichotomy of the song, we get Ratcliffe and all the settlers singing about all this, we're going to dig up this land and we're going to find all this, these gold and jewels and everything. And Ratcliffe is going to be so, Ratcliffe's idea is that he's going to be so rich at everything, and to the point where he can dress in gold and have all of the women in court swooning over him and being knighted and lorded by the king and everything, and which is what he wants. And the rest of the men just more want to find money, find the gold and jewels or whatever, so that way they can use it to support themselves and their families, of course, which I would say is a slightly more noble thing to do than just being selfish and wanting it to increase your status and make you rich when you already have a bit of status. But we see that and everything, and we see all the soldiers here with that. And the other part of the song is John Smith, because he goes off to explore, and there's a waterfall area in the forest and everything, so the giant outcroppings of rocks and everything. And he's very, John Smith in the course of the movie is very enamored with the land and everything, whereas Ratcliffe wants to blow everything up to find gold. And so we get that dichotomy there. And and like Pocahontas starts following John Smith around, and he ends up interacting with Miko at some point because he gives Miko food. And so that's just funny. And then of course we have the moment where John Smith and Pocahontas finally meet, and he was getting ready to shoot her, because he's used to having it be that a lot of, as he refers to them, savages, they're indigenous people, trying to attack him, which he's an adventurer. He states in the movie that he's been an adventurer for a long time. He's seen lots of different new places, and he just, he's kind of used to this. It's kind of like, okay, well, let's go see what this place looks like, and okay, now someone's trying to kill me. So that's just kind of what he's used to. And he meets Pocahontas, and he's, stunned by her. And, she runs off, and he chases after her. And of course, they have the moment where, that, neither of them can understand each other. She, of course, speaks Native American, the language of her tribe, and he, of course, speaks English, and they, of course, don't understand each other. And we have, the reprise of, listen with your heart, listen to your heart comes in. And we have, the magic wind that guides Pocahontas kind of, swirl around them, and they connect, and then they're finally able to understand each other. Which, I mean, the other Disney movies, they all probably speak the same language. Snow White is kind of a more Germanish type fairy tale, Germanic, so they would, they probably will speak German, a lot of other things like that, where it's like, okay, they all kind of speak the same language. This one is kind of the first time where we have two different ones from two different worlds. I guess, like mermaid to human might be a bit of a difference, but, they're in the same region. We'll go with the fact that maybe they have the same language. With this, it's the first time that we have two different, worlds coming together in the fact that they both speak different languages. So they had to find a way to get over that language barrier. Magic wind that translates for you because you listen with your heart. Okay. and so they go on to, Pocahontas starts teaching him about the area and everything. And he starts talking about, oh, well, we're going to make things better here for you. We're going to teach you all this stuff. And she's like, but we're perfectly happy the way we are and everything. And it was, the whole concept of, the settlers would come in and they would think that, okay, well, these guys are, as I said, savages. And they would use that as a reason to overtake the people and then teach them what they think is proper. And Pocahontas starts, and this is where we get, of course, the Colors of the Wind song, which is, the big song for the movie. It's the first song that they actually wrote for the movie, that Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz wrote for the movie. And it's definitely my favorite song in the movie. We get the beautiful imagery of the eagles, the sunflowers, beautiful landscapes, and everything like that I love. And it's, it's kind of the song where Pocahontas and John Smith kind of fall in love, but she's, teaching him about the fact that, you can't just think that wherever you come in that, what you do is best. It's, you have to see what's already here, that, how can you, how can you own the earth until you can paint with all the colors of the wind? And, so he's off learning all that. And then we have the Native Americans, Pocahontas' tribe learns about these, these settlers that are there. And, Kocoum goes to just watch them. They're not there to attack them. They're just there to watch them. And, Ratcliffe is very worried about the fact that they're not finding any gold and everything, given all the stories that he'd heard and everything from the Spanish and everything that, oh, there's gold everywhere in the U.S., in the New World. And he's, very distraught about this. And, all the rest of the settlers are just like, okay, well, we'll dig and then we'll work on the fort. Because we're going to need a place to sleep that's not on the frickin' boat that we've been on for the past however many months on the way here. And, so they, they're doing that and everything. And then unfortunately, this is where I, of course, get the first interaction between the Native Americans and the settlers. And it's not a good interaction. Unfortunately, the settlers think that they're there to attack them. And then unfortunately, the settlers fire on the Native Americans. And one of the Native Americans does get injured. And they get taken back to the village. And they're a lot more on edge now. And both groups are, unfortunately. At this point, John Smith left Pocahontas and he's gone back. And he's interacting with his men again, with the settlers. Him and Thomas seem to be getting along rather well, which is, good. What ends up happening is, of course, John Smith goes back, and, and Pocahontas does still, she goes and she sees what happens to her fellow tribesmen, that he was hurt. And, later on, John Smith sneaks out from the camp of the settlers. And he's kind of, I guess, more, he's upset because he does want to see, well, he's not upset, he just, misses Pocahontas. And he makes his way into the village where he sees Nakoma and Pocahontas, and they're just, they're picking corn. And Pocahontas, Nakoma is just like, but, and, Pocahontas covers Nakoma's mouth, and Nakoma's just like, how do you freaking know each other? It's like, I would have that reaction too. And, Pocahontas goes off, and we do get a little bit of inference from Kocoum because he comes to talk to Nakoma. And, nobody is supposed to be leaving the village right now except for the scouts. And Kocoum says to Nakoma, if you see Pocahontas, just tell her to stay here, because she listens to you. And it does appear that Kocoum does care about Pocahontas. He doesn't strike me as the kind that's like, oh, I'm just gonna, ask to marry the chief's daughter because then I'll get to be chief. No, he does seem to honestly care about Pocahontas, which is a good thing. Which is definitely a step up from Gaston in regards to the fact that he just wanted her because she was beautiful. Kocoum actually does care about Pocahontas. Which is, good. But, So Pocahontas and John Smith go off, and they end up going to Grandmother Willow's Glen, where she, introduces them, and John Smith has a reaction of, the tree is talking to me. Why is the tree talking? And yeah, so I don't blame him for that. But they talked for a while, and at one point, his compass had been taken by Miko, and he ends up letting Miko keep the compass and everything. And he explains to Pocahontas when she asks what a compass is, he's like, "Oh, it's something you use to find your way when you get lost." And at some point she asks, "Well, why are you guys, why are you guys here? I mean, what are all of you settlers doing here and everything?" He's like, "Well, we're here, searching for land and searching for gold." She's like, "Gold? It's yellow, comes out of the ground, is very valuable." And she shows him corn, because that's what, that depicts corn in their opinion. And he's like, "No, that's not it." And he shows her a, gold coin. And she's like, "This is gold." And she's like, "No, we don't have anything like that around here." Their opinion of value is stuff that you can eat, or stuff that you can use for hunting, or stuff that would be useful for making weapons. And, so that's her opinion on that. And, for her, that type of metal wouldn't really have any use for her, because unfortunately, gold is nice for decoration, but it's not the most durable thing in the world when it comes to, taking hits in battle. And so we get that, and he keeps the corn, and later on he takes it back to the his to the men, because he has, they meet in secret, a couple of times, and he heads back to his men, and he finds out that Radcliffe thinks that they're savages, and thinks that the native that the natives have taken all the gold and everything. And John Smith's like, "They don't have any gold." He's just like, "They have this instead, it's corn." They're like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Can you eat it?" And he's like, "You eat it." And they're just like, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's better than hardtack and gruel." Which I'm like, yeah, there's probably a lot of things out there that are better than hardtack and gruel, and that's all you've eaten on a ship for several months. And so he's trying to convince the settlers that maybe we shouldn't attack the natives. Ratcliffe is, of course, no, we have to attack the natives, we have to do this. No, I want my gold and everything. They're savages, so they'll kill us as soon as they're given the chance. And John Smith, of course, doesn't believe this, and he goes to try to talk to Pocahontas, and her people are ready to go up against them. And of course, we have the line of, "These white men are dangerous," which no truer words in history have ever been spoken. And yeah, and so she doesn't think that her people should fight. She doesn't think her people should fight the settlers, but they have a ton of their other allies coming in to be able to help them. And she sneaks off again. John Smith and Pocahontas have snuck off again to Grandmother Willow's Glen, and Cocoam follows Pocahontas, and Thomas follows John Smith. And of course, if you've seen the movie, you know what happens, because Grandmother Willow points out to them, change happens in ripples. It has to start somewhere, and if it starts with the two of you, then that would be a good thing, because then it can spread. And so we get that analogy, and then of course, they kiss, and then we have Cocoam sees this, and Thomas sees this, and unfortunately, Cocoam attacks John Smith, and that unfortunately results in they fight, and then Thomas shoots Cocoam, and Pocahontas then wants to attack Thomas, of course, because he killed her friend, her tribesman, and that's not a good thing. And they, Thomas leaves. Well, John Smith told him to leave, because he just killed a guy, and that's probably not the best idea when him and Pocahontas were trying to figure a way to have the two groups of people exist in harmony. But Thomas leaves and runs back to the fort and tells him that John's been captured and everything, and that Ratcliffe uses this as an opportunity to set up an idea to, we'll attack and rescue John, and destroy them at the same time and get our gold. and Pocahontas and the other, Pocahontas, the other, some of her other tribesmen show up and they take Kocomo back, who's unfortunately dead, and, they capture John Smith as well. I kind of think he let himself be captured, and they head back to, his home, or, well, no, they take John Smith, of course, back to the village, and he explained, they of course they're accusing him, and Powhatan's like, he will die at dawn type thing, for that he killed Kocoum and everything. And Pocahontas just wants to go in and speak to John Smith, and Nakoma helps her. And in the original movie, it's just them talking, and there's not really. It's just kind of them talking and everything. And John Smith, one of the things that he does is he tries to put up like a tough exterior of like, oh, I've been in worse scrapes than this. Can't think of any right now, but I've been in them. Trying to look tough and everything. In the 10th anniversary, they added in a scene. They had a song that was written that called "If I Never Knew You," which is just kind of more another love song between Pocahontas and John Smith. And the idea of the song was, if I never knew you, I would have, never changed this. And, it's from both sides. It's a duet. And in the 10th anniversary edition, when they released this, for 10 years, they added in the scene, kind of like what they did with, Beauty and the Beast, where they added in Human again, and with Lion King, where they added in, the Morning Report. In this, of course, they add in this, which is a scene of them singing in the tent and everything. That's, if I never knew you, I would have spent my whole life, not knowing any of this stuff, not knowing kind of, it's supposed to be like what love felt, but also, these new ideas type of thing. And they add that into the 10th anniversary edition. And then, Pocahontas leaves and she goes to go and talk to Grandmother Willow. And, the Native Americans are, of course, getting ready for war. And the settlers are getting ready for war, which is where we have the song Savages, which is, from the Native Americans' point of view, of course, the settlers are the savages. And from the settlers' point of view, the Native Americans are the savages. So, it's like, they're demons and everything. And we have Pocahontas talking to Grandmother Willow. And she doesn't want John Smith to die, but she doesn't want to betray her father and her people. And we get the kind of the listen with your heart again. And Miko gives Pocahontas the compass, which is the spinning arrow that she kept seeing. And I think at this point in time, Miko may have broken the compass because he kept like hitting it on a rock, and I think it probably broke. But like, we have Pocahontas sitting there looking at the compass, and it spins, with the wind and everything. And Grandmother was saying, follow your heart, where is it going to lead you? And it spins and spins, and then it stops, and that's where Pocahontas runs. And we have her, kind of undertone of Savages, where it's like, I have to try to stop this. I have to prevent this war from happening. And she's running to, where they're going to execute John Smith. And we have the savage, we have the settlers, and we have the Native Americans, and then we have Pocahontas running there, and they all get to this area at the same time. And of course, the settlers are all, they have their, their gun, their rifles, and everything pointed up at the Native Americans, ready to attack as soon as they kill John Smith. And they, and all the Native Americans have their, bows and arrows pointed down at the settlers, ready to attack, of course. And admittedly, in an all-out brawl, given the fact that the Native Americans probably have numbers on their side, that would probably help. But the settlers, of course, have guns and ammunition and a bit more of armor. And, that's, I don't 100% know who I'd be putting my money on there, but, Pocahontas shows up, and she, throws herself over John Smith to protect him from being killed by her father. And, the whole, if you kill him, you'll have to kill me too. And, she makes her father calm down and stop this and prevent the execution. And, he accepts this. And, the settlers kind of watch this, and they kind of all put their guns down a little bit. And, Ratcliffe is still, no, attack them. And, the Native Americans are, of course, releasing John Smith at this point in time. And Thomas points out, but they're letting him go. And Ratcliffe, grabs Thomas's gun, or grabs one of the guns, and he's ready to fire at Powhatan, and at the chief. And John Smith sees this, and he pushes Powhatan out of the way, and he takes the shot. And then Ratcliffe is kind of arrested by the other men, and Thomas kind of takes over a little bit at this time. I think Thomas is supposed to be a reference to like the man that had ended up being like the governor of Jamestown for a long time. I think that's supposed to be the reference that Thomas is, simply because he gains confidence and he takes charge at the end of the movie, from the settlers, or he takes charge of the settlers at the end of the movie. And Ratcliffe is gagged and chained and everything, and he's tossed in a boat to be taken back to the ship to then sail back, because they have to take John Smith back to England, because he is he's injured now. He took a bullet, and he protected the chief, so that ingratiates them to ingratiates him to the tribe. And as I said, I'm just sticking with the movie. I'll do the historical inaccuracies later. And he has to get taken back to England before to get treatment for his gunshot wound. And Pocahontas and the Native Americans show up, and they give them food for the journey. And he's gifted the king the chief's cloak and everything, of you'll always be welcome here and everything. And Percy and Miko kind of were like at odds earlier in the movie, and now they're friends along with Flit, because Percy kind of ends up liking Pocahontas more than Ratcliffe, which isn't saying much on Pocahontas's part, but it shows you how terrible of an owner to a degree that Ratcliffe was. And I do like the fact that like Wiggins gets in the line, because at some point Ratcliffe made the comment to Wiggins of like, I wonder why they hate us in regards to the Native Americans, and Wiggins goes, because we invaded their land, blew up their earth, and dug up their trees. And Ratcliffe is just like, I had such high hopes for him, and he came so highly recommended, and he goes, oh, that was just like a backhanded insult to Wiggins. And then we have at the end of the movie, when Ratcliffe is being hauled off in chains, Wiggins just goes, and he came so highly recommended. This is kind of the last we see of Wiggins. He's not in the second movie, and I mean, I think he's in like some of the little storybooks that they've done for Pocahontas, and like for like like after John Smith goes back to England, but like before the sequel came out. They had like little books in between there that were about other adventures that Pocahontas went on. I don't remember if he's in the video game that I have, because I don't remember if the video game specifically involves the events of the movie, or if it was just the video game just involved like day-to-day stuff for Pocahontas. I don't have the game anymore, and even if I did, it's been a good 15, 17 years or whatever since I played it, so I don't remember. It was fun for the time, but Pocahontas and John Smith say goodbye to each other, and he tries to convince her to come back to England with her, or with him, and he's like, no, and she's like, no, I have to stay here and kind of be the mediator between the settlers and the Native Americans. And so he goes off, and they say goodbye that way, and she runs up to the cliff to see to watch the ship leave. And that's basically where the movie ends. And then, of course, that in the original movie, this is where we get the song "If I Never Knew You," was just the end credits song, which is still a good song, and I think they still have it on there. Now we have the cast. So we had Irene Bedard as Pocahontas. We had Mel Gibson as John Smith, which is of course a choice that has aged wonderfully. We have David Ogden Stiers, who previously voiced Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast, as Governor Ratcliffe. He also voices Wiggins, which is just shows his range. We have Russell Means as Chief Powhatan. We have Christian Bale as Thomas. So yeah, we have Batman in the movie, a very young Batman. Irony, well, I guess not irony, but I guess trivia. Christian Bale would later go on to star in a movie called The New World, where he plays John Rolfe, who historically is the man that Pocahontas ends up marrying. Um, and it's I haven't seen it, but it's like, okay, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I guess we'll see. Um, I haven't seen the movie, don't intend to at the moment. Probably is a bit more historically accurate than this. Not really too much else there. Linda Hunt is grandmother Willow, but not too much else. Development of the movie. The development kind of started after The Rescuers Down Under came out. And what it ended up happening was, they do these different story meetings and pitch sessions and everything. So, people are supposed to come with different ideas. And they kind of thought about doing, kind of a Western type thing, with like Inley Oakley and Buffalo Bill and Pecos Bill and stuff like that. And, one of the ideas of like Pocahontas had come up. And kind of the way that it was pitched was apparently they had taken the gentleman that pitched it had taken a picture of Tiger Lily from Peter Pan and wrote on wrote the title, Walt Disney's Pocahontas, which the Native American depictions in Pocahontas are much better than the Native American depictions in Peter Pan, and Tiger Lily's kind of the best depicted out of the Peter Pan ones, so I guess I see where that's coming from. And they tipped it, they had the one sentence thing of an Indian princess who is torn between her father's wishes to destroy the English settlers and her wishes to help them, a girl caught between her father and her people and her love for the enemy. And kind of later on, it ended up getting a bit of the element of we were particularly interested in exploring the theme of if we don't learn to live with one another, we will destroy ourselves. Which I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good example of that. Which is, I would say that Pocahontas, for all of the historical inaccuracies in the Disney animated movie, at least shows that you gotta learn to live with each other and work together, or else nothing's gonna get done. Songs in the movie, they were written by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. Of course, we have the Virginia Company, which is the opening song. We have Steady as the Beating Drum, which is kind of the theme for the Native Americans, and Powhatan's ideas of things have to just go steady. And then we have Just Around the River Bend, where it's Pocahontas is What's Waiting for Me, and Listen to Your Heart, which is Grandmother Willow. And then of course we have Colors of the Wind. Well, first we have Mine, 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 which is, Ratcliffe and John Smith singing, opposing ideas. And we have Colors of the Wind. And then there is the If I Never Knew You. And then there is Savages, which is kind of the battle song. And then we move into Pocahontas 2, Journey to a New World, which came out in 1998. It's several years after the original film, sometime between 1610 and 1614, and they didn't get all the cast back for it. They got a couple of the cast members back, but not all of them. We have John Smith. It starts off in England again. We have John Smith, and he gets chased by Ratcliffe, because Ratcliffe has told the king that no, John Smith lied to you. There is gold there, the savages have it and everything. And, they've kind of heard the story of Pocahontas because, when John Smith and the others would have returned, there would have been stories of, well, how did John Smith get shot and everything? Just going on what's in the movie. I'll go to historical inaccuracies later. But they work through that. And, John Smith appears to have died because Ratcliffe sent men after him and he appeared to have died. And this is where we're introduced to King James and his wife, Queen Anne, who seems to be the more level-headed of the two, which I don't know if that was true or not in real life, but yeah, have the queen be the level-headed one. That works for me. But he's like, King James wants his gold from the New World, And Ratcliffe is like, oh yes, well, if you give me permission to sail with this armada, we'll take them down and blah 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 blah. And Queen Anne's just like, how about we wait for John Rolfe to return with this Princess Pocahontas, and we can hear her side of the story, type thing. She can be a representative. And Ratcliffe doesn't like this, but he's kind of willing to put up with it for the moment. And then we have King James is like, fine. And then, of course, we're introduced to the John Rolfe character, who is historically the man that Pocahontas does marry. Historical inaccuracies later. He goes there. He's supposed to be a diplomat and everything, to go to the Chief Powhatan's tribe and bring. He's originally sent to go and bring Chief Powhatan back to the king. And he goes there, and we see that Jamestown has started to have been built up and everything, and that the settlers and the Native Americans kind of seem to be getting along better. The Native Americans are still very wary of the settlers, but there's kind of a bit of an uneasy peace has happened. And Pocahontas kind of acts as like the peacekeeper between the two. And we see that she has been told that John Smith died a little while ago, and she still has the compass that he gave her. And Nakoma is like, it's been many moons since the death of John Smith. It's like, isn't it time that you let it go? And what ends up happening is we do get a song, and I think it's called "Where Do I Go From Here?" I think is the name of the song. And Pocahontas is much more, she's like, well, John Smith is gone, but I still want to help with keeping peace between the settlers and the natives, between my people and the settlers. And, but, where do I go from here? And, she buries the compass in the snow, which I'm like, okay, you bury it in the snow. Once the snow melts, the compass is going to still be there. Unless it gets like washed away for whatever reason, but it'll be there. She buries it on like the cliff that she watched John Smith leave from at the end of the first movie. And she still has Miko and Percy and Flit, and they're all still there. And so we get a lot of that. We see there's changes, and it's winter, obviously. And John Rolfe shows up, and they unfortunately do not have a very good first meeting, because there had been a high tension moment had happened between the natives and the settlers, and Pocahontas had diffused it. John Rolfe kind of thinks he's diffused it, but they go off. Pocahontas goes off, and one of the settlers makes a comment of if it wasn't for Pocahontas, for Princess Pocahontas, we things would be so much different here. And so he goes like, maybe I should meet this Princess Pocahontas. So he goes off to the village, and he takes his horse as a gift to give to, Pocahontas and everything, as, I give this gift and ask for, the chief to come with me back to go meet my chief. And, we get, clash of cultures of, Chief Powhatan's like, but I don't want to go and see your chief. So if he wants to come if he wants to talk to me, he's going to have to come here. And John Rolfe is like, well, that simply isn't done. And, so we get fun with that, which is just, okay. But, so Pocahontas decides that, well, my father won't go, but I will. And she decides that she's going to go with John Rolfe, and she goes to speak to Grandmother Willow again. And basically we kind of get, listen to the spirit within, it's like, I told you to listen to, everything around you before. Now you have to listen to yourself, to decide what's best for you. And Pocahontas chooses to go back to England with John Rolfe, so that way she can meet the king and try to, settle everything and calm everything down, to keep peace between her people and the settlers. And, her tribe, of course, shows up and says goodbye to her, including Nakoma. And then we have her father sends someone with her. And I think I'm going to get the name right. If I butcher it, I apologize. Her father sends Utamata Makin, who is just usually referred to as Ute. most of the movie, by John Rolfe and the other people, and he heads off to, he's there to go and protect Pocahontas, but her father also gives him a staff, and says, for every white man that you see, mark a notch in this staff so we can see their numbers. Ends up being a funny bit at the end of or partway through the movie that results in that, but I'll get to that. And so he's sent to be a guard for Pocahontas, and Miko and Flit and Percy were supposed to stay, but they snuck onto the ship. And that ends up being fun, and they're still there, and they make their way to England and everything. Back to the Pocahontas is going to a new world for her, which is England, and John Rolfe is returning home. So what he sees in America is the new world for him, and she's her new world is going to England. Hence the title of the movie. And they go off, and they make their way to England, and she ends up deciding, she kind of ends up. They get to England, and they have morning in England, or whatever the song was called. I don't remember. What a Day in England. Sorry, what a Day in London. And it's Pocahontas running around and seeing all these people, and all these people seeing her, and Ute's walking around like chopping little notches in the stick, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller with his each notch. And then at one point he just has a toothpick type thing, and he just throws it away. He's like, okay, there's too many. Bye bye. And so it's her being introduced to the people, and seeing all these all this new stuff, these houses that are so big and tall, and these giant trees, and all these people in these different outfits and clothes and everything that she's not used to. And like Shakespeare makes an appearance in the song, even though I think he was dead by the time she actually came along, but whatever. Whatever, it's funny. But they move through that and everything, and unfortunately at this point, this is when Ratcliffe shows up, and we do get a moment where it's like Percy recognizes Ratcliffe's carriage and recognizes Ratcliffe, and he's just like hiding and terrified because he abandoned Ratcliffe, and Ratcliffe doesn't seem to care. And Ratcliffe explains to Pocahontas and to John Rolfe that oh well, you're invited to the king's dinner tomorrow night or whatever, and he'll expect you there, and you better be on your best behavior, or I sail with my armada, and I'll destroy your people type thing. Basically threatening Pocahontas, and if you can't, because he harbors a grudge against her because she kind of forded, she stopped him the last time. And so then John Rolfe and Pocahontas head back to John Rolfe's house, where they meet Mrs. Jenkins, and who is his housekeeper. And the Rolfes seem to be a very well-to-do family, which is so they have a lot of money and everything and status. And we get the song, I think it was called "Wait Till He Sees You" or whatever type thing, where it's like Pocahontas is working on getting ready for the ball, and so she gets the corset and the weird wire dress and so much other stuff, and makeup, and the powder and everything, different funny hairstyles. John Rolfe and Ute don't necessarily get along. Ute just kind of tolerates him, and so Ute is supposed to come as well, and we get Pocahontas and her very it is a very beautiful dress, not a dress I would want to wear, but it is a very nice dress. And her and John Rolfe, and they did a little bit of practice dancing, and they head off, and I think Mrs. Jenkins kind of is already implying that maybe John Rolfe will like Pocahontas and everything, and she seems to be okay with that. I think she was a little, I think, befuddled by Pocahontas at first, but Mrs. Jenkins is a very nice lady, and they have a thing where it's like her glasses are always off, and they have to keep putting her glasses on her, which Pocahontas does a few times, and mostly it's just a funny thing that they do with the character, and she's just a nice old lady that has kind of helped raise John Rolfe, so she's very familiar with him, and she very much seems to like Pocahontas right off the bat. And Ute starts very much liking Britain right off the bat because he seems to like tea, and then he also seems to very much like the little finger sandwiches that Mrs. Jenkins keeps serving. But Pocahontas and John Rolfe and Ute head off to go to the ball. And behind the scenes, we are shown that Ratcliffe is in charge of the entertainment for the ball, and he hires these different jesters to work as, they're in the entertainment there, and he's going to be part of the entertainment, which we can already tell is not going to be good because there's a live bear that they have, which does not seem to be a very good idea. But Pocahontas and John Rolfe get to the party with Ute, and Pocahontas does seem to be a bit, they get introduced to the king and queen, and she's very nervous, but John Rolfe keeps kind of calming her, trying to help, because they've been on a boat for however long it took for them to get to the New World, or get back to England and everything. So they seem to have developed a bit of a friendship at this point in time. And he does seem to like her, and he cares about her and everything. And they're introduced to the king and queen, and the queen seems to be a bit nicer and everything. And the king, Pocahontas just, the king just thinks, Pocahontas is just charming, this charming girl, because she's just, very polite and everything, and, very complimentary to him and everything. She's like, but I would very much like to discuss this Armada idea. And he's like, yes, but after the party, I can't neglect my other guests. And, so he's all set for that and everything. Pocahontas and John Rolfe, they dance with a whole bunch of the other guests. And at one point, Pocahontas does have to dance with, Ratcliffe. We get a funny moment with Ute because he's introduced with Pocahontas and John Rolfe and everything, and the guy that's announcing them and everything is like, Ute just has on his pants and some face paint, and he's like, the announcer just was blocks him coming in, jacket required, sir. And we hear this, and Ute took his jacket and put it on. And then we have all these other ladies that are just all fawning over Ute, and he's just Ute just says, he smiles, all these women oh, he's so tall, type thing. And then we get on to the dinner portion of the night, which is where we have the song, what is it called? It's Not What It Appears, I think is the name of the song, which is where these jesters are singing about, all this stuff is not what it appears to be, and it's supposed to be, Ratcliffe is part of it, and he's supposed to be using it as a way to taunt Pocahontas about, tell the king, Pocahontas is not what she appears to be. She's not this, this sweet girl, this, this innocent thing that you think she is. She's not, civilized, the way that we are. And they, the end of the song is they bring out this bear, and the jesters are getting ready to stab the bear, and Pocahontas stops them and prevents it. And the king, because of what she did, and she defies the king, and then he deems her uncivilized, and she's sent to the Tower of London to be executed. And Ratcliffe, of course, uses this as he's going to use his armada and everything to go after the people, go after the Native Americans, and because he proved to the king that he was right. And John Rolfe goes back home, and we get earlier a little bit in the movie, or in between the scenes, we get this this shadowy figure in a hood at a bar, like a outskirts of town bar or whatever. And he's we have all the other people in the room. It's I heard that Pocahontas is going to be executed and everything. She'll rot in the Tower of London, or whatever the case may be. And the guy leaves, and then he ends up at John Rolfe's house, and because he mentions John Rolfe and everything, that's where the hooded figure goes. And we have the hooded figure and John Rolfe sneak their way into the Tower of London, and they have Miko and Flit and Percy are there, and they save Pocahontas, and it's revealed that the one that helped them, that the hooded figure is John Smith, who's not dead, and Pocahontas is very happy to see that he's not dead. And the three of them escape, and John Rolfe and John Smith don't quite see eye to eye. John Smith's version of doing things is a bit more unorthodox, and John Rolfe is a bit more proper for things. And so they kind of butt heads a little bit, but they both care about Pocahontas, and they escape, and they head off to this I guess abandoned cabin in the woods or whatever, around the outskirts of London. And John Smith is, or Pocahontas is very adamant that we have to, and John Rolfe is like, well, we have to stop the Armada because then Ratcliffe will kill all of my people, and that's a bad thing. And John Smith is like, yes, but who, John Smith, he doesn't want the Native Americans to die, but he's, I don't exactly know how to put it. He's just not, he doesn't think that Pocahontas should go and face the king. But John Rolfe kind of thinks that she should go and talk to the king. And she kind of wants to talk to the king, but she doesn't know who to listen to. And she runs off into the woods. And, she's still got her dress on and her makeup and everything. And, her hair is a mess. But she runs off into the woods. And we have this moment where she's, sitting in front of the stream, because she kept trying to listen to her inner voice, her inner spirit, but, there kept being too many distractions, and now she makes herself do it. And, she, cleans off her, she's sitting there, and we see the reflection of, her in her dress, and then the reflection in the water is, her as she's, her normal outfit, her normal self, her true self. And John Smith and John Rolfe tried to run after her, but John Smith tried to run after her, but John Rolfe stopped him, or whatever the case may be, so Pocahontas could go and think. And when she comes back, she's washed all the makeup off her face, and her hair is down. She's still in a dress, but she's looking more like herself and feeling more like herself. And she explains that, no, I am going to go and see the king, because if he's going to do this, then he needs to know who I am before he goes and attacks my people, type thing. He has to see who I really am. And, and then they all make their way to the castle and everything. And Pocahontas, sneaks her way in. And she, talks to the king and talks to the queen. And the queen seems a bit more open-minded and seems to, placate the king to make him calm down. And, he's, but Ratcliffe, and the king's like, but Ratcliffe assured me that there was gold and everything. And John Smith is like, and he also assured you that I was dead, but I'm not. And the king just kind of relents. And he's like, but Ratcliffe has already set sail. And then, Pocahontas and John Rolfe and John Smith all run off to go and try to stop the Armada from sailing. The war Armada, in this case. And they are able to catch up. And, they have some fun with it, because, it's like everybody on the ship still think that John Smith is dead, but he's like, I'm the ghost of John Smith. And scaring them and everything for superstitious. And John Smith and John Rolfe finally kind of work better together this way. And Pocahontas faces Ratcliffe again, but he she's able to, I don't remember exactly what happens, but he gets knocked off the ship, and the Armadas are stopped. The Armada's stopped, and Ratcliffe is arrested by the king. And so he's gonna be going to rot in jail. The rat is gonna go rot. And we have Pocahontas and John Rolfe and John Smith, all happy, and everything's kind of the way it's supposed to be. And then there's this big party for them at the castle, and I think John Smith is I guess he's ready in order to become knighted, I guess. I don't remember exactly what it is. But he's, he's supposed to be given, these ships and everything, or he's supposed to be given a ship so he can sail. And he was, he's still very much in love with Pocahontas. But, he's like, okay, well, we can go and sail and see the world and do it together and everything. And he's like, and he sees her face, and he's like, but that's not what you want, is it? She's like, we walked the same path before. Mine's different now. And in the context of the Disney movie, she still cares about him, and they're still friends. And he decides that, um, that he's happy for her, and he wants her to be happy and everything. And John Rolfe and Pocahontas. Pocahontas is ready to go back home and everything. She did what she was supposed to, and John Rolfe, of course, thinks that she still loves John Smith, and he wants her happy. They both want her happy, but he leaves, and what ends up happening is that Pocahontas is ready to leave. It's the day that she's supposed to leave, and Ute stays in England with Jenkins, and the bear is now living with them for whatever reason. But they're all Percy and Miko and Flit are all heading back to the ship, and Pocahontas is heading back to the ship after she says goodbye to Mrs. Jenkins and Ute, and they get on the ship. She gets on the ship and they're sailing off, and she had explained, Pocahontas had explained to, or no, John Rolfe had told Pocahontas that he told the king, "I have a duty to honor what is in my heart." And he, indicates that he doesn't want to be an advisor to the king. He wants to be with her. And the king is okay with this. And John Rolfe is on the ship, and he, him and Pocahontas, kiss as the ship sails off into the sunset, of course. And that's basically where that movie ends. We still have, Irene Ballard returned to play Pocahontas. We had Billy Zane as John Rolfe. We had Donald Gibson as John Smith. And of course, David Ogden Stiers returned to play Governor Ratcliffe. The songs were, of course, "Where Do I Go From Here," which is the kind of the first song in the movie about Pocahontas singing about where am I supposed to go now that John Smith is gone, and "What a Day in London," which is everybody singing Pocahontas and Pocahontas seeing all of London. "Wait Till He Sees You" is, of course, kind of the song that Pocahontas and Miss Jenkins and John Rolfe kind of all sing while they're getting ready for the ball and everything. "Things Are Not What They Appear" is Ratcliffe's song, singing to singing along with all the jesters and taunting Pocahontas. And then "Between Two Worlds" is the end credits song. It's supposed to be sung between John Rolfe and Pocahontas. "We can build a bridge between two worlds" is one of the lines that I always remember from it. And in my research for this, it's like a lot of people didn't necessarily care for this Pocahontas sequel, and a lot of people didn't like John Rolfe because, even though historically, yes, Pocahontas does marry John Rolfe, in the context of the movies, they much preferred her with John Smith. And, if that's the couple that you like, that's fine. I actually kind of like her with John Rolfe a bit more because he chooses to want to go with her for the context of the characters in the movie, of course, in the movies. Not that the Disney version of John Smith is much better than the actual historical version. Same thing with the Disney version of John Rolfe is much better than the historical version of John Rolfe. But that's where those went. This sequel is one of the ones that came out not too long after the original movie. And then we get into House of Mouse. Pocahontas makes a couple of different appearances in House of Mouse. Her and Miko. I think there's one where she's with Robin Hood. There's one where she's just relaxing and has her hair blowing in the wind. And then they show Grandmother Willow with the elders of Disney with Triton and Merlin. Not too much there. As I said, she's unfortunately not in the Kingdom Hearts games. Kind of wish she had been, as maybe not necessarily one of the Princesses of Heart, but in the Kingdom Hearts 3, they deal with Princesses of Light, which the original Princesses of Heart are Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, which I never quite get, Belle, Ariel, And then there's an original character for the games whose name is Kyrie, who is the main female character in the first couple of games. She's another Princess of Heart because there are 7 Princesses of Heart. And then in Kingdom Hearts 3, they introduced the concept of the Princesses of Light, which are Anna. I think it's Anna and Elsa. Rapunzel. And then I think Kyrie is still considered a Princess of Light. But like, I don't remember if they state an exact number of how many Princesses of Light there are supposed to be, but by that logic, maybe Pocahontas could be a Princess of Light. Same thing with like, Merida and Tiana. Could have been Princesses of Light for the Kingdom Hearts. They don't bring Pocahontas into Once Upon a Time at all, which, considering the fact that that did involve real people, it's not really, it is kind of an American myth, but it did have real people in it. Pocahontas was a real person. John Rolfe was a real person. Ratcliffe, John Smith, these were all real people. Whereas, with like Robin Hood, Robin Hood was more of a folk tale. There's no one that specifically is proven to actually be Robin Hood. We know that Prince John was a real person, and the king was a real person, but there wasn't really, Robin Hood was more a myth, a story like King Arthur. Then we move into Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is, we have all the princesses there and everything in the Oh My Disney area where Vanellope meets them. We have Pocahontas there. She seems to have her father's staff. She also has the power of wind and such. And, she is one of the people that's with the Daddy Issues group, with Jasmine and such. And there's a few others, and that doesn't have a mother. Pocahontas doesn't have a mother. And then of course we get them in their, comfy, relaxed clothes. And Pocahontas says, says a blue corn moon, and then it says, which is one of the lines in Colors of the Wind, and so that's what we get there. We see her with Miko, and then at the end of the movie, the climax of the movie. Well, she's kind of there when, because the princesses kind of try to explain to Vanellope, when it comes to about singing and everything, Ariel, kind of, wants to do, part of your world and everything. And, so the princesses kind of explain to Vanellope, of course, what it's like for them to sing, which results in Vanellope singing, later on, which I will talk about when I get to Ralph Breaks the Internet. But we get that, and then at the end of the movie, when all the princesses are trying to save Ralph, it's Ariel summons a whole bunch of water, and Pocahontas rides up on Jasmine's, on the carpet with Jasmine to use her wind to like form it into a spiral and everything, to and then for Elsa to freeze it so that way they can soften soften Ralph's landing. So she's there as one of Vanellope's friends, and then they become friends with Ralph, which is basically where that goes. As I said, they've done different Pocahontas storybooks, of course, but not really too much else major. I don't think there's any references to Pocahontas in Descendants. I could be wrong, but I don't think there is. Since they more tended to deal with the fairy tale aspects of things, and Pocahontas was definitely a real person, because there are still descendants of her around today. Now we are going to do the historical inaccuracies section, which I probably won't get to every single one of them, but I will try to go over the major ones. So, as I said, Pocahontas is the only Disney princess to be based on a real person, a real historical figure. But it's very loosely based on her. And, they move some things around, like they use some parts that are true. She was, the chief's daughter. She did, kind of the area, of course, where they, have the movie take place is true. But they have, different, things there. For one, Pocahontas is like 12 when, she meets John Smith, and he's like 28, and they don't actually fall in love That depiction of it was more written because John Smith, after he got back to England, he wrote, after he got back to England, after, he got shot, which was not something that actually happened while he was, he wasn't defending Pocahontas' father, it just happened. He got shot and he had to go back for medical treatment, and he survived, and he ended up, writing this story that glorified him and, aged Pocahontas up so it wasn't so weird that he was, around her or whatever. And, he did teach her English, that was true, but they adjust a few things there. And Pocahontas' real name, or her given name, was, I apologize if I mispronounce this, Makota? No, Matoaka, sorry, was her real name, which means bright stream between the hills, is what it, changed to. Pocahontas was her nickname. And, she's, 10 to 13 or so when she first meets John Smith, as opposed to when she's quite a bit older. They did not actually have a, romantic relationship. He did teach her English and such so she could translate between her people and the settlers. And in real life, she did marry John Rolfe, but that was a lot different because Pocahontas did save John Smith from dying. She, prevented her father, I think, from killing him. I think that was still true, but it's not as, quite dramatic as what gets portrayed based on like what was accounts in John Smith's book, which was more to glorify himself. But she did kind of keep the peace between her people and the settlers. And then at one point, when John Rolfe showed up several years later, he ended up actually kidnapping Pocahontas and keeping her on a boat for a long time to prevent, she was kept as a hostage to prevent the natives from attacking. For reasons, he was actually a tobacco farmer and he had slaves and it was not good. And it was just a lot of issues with that. And they did end up getting married, but it was more because she wanted to just more keep the peace between her people and the settlers, of course. And Pocahontas does go to the New World, does go to England at one point. As I said, I'm probably skipping over a few things in regards to this, and I apologize. She's kidnapped at various, she's kidnapped, of course. And she's forced to work against her will, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in regards to like her and Rolfe and everything. And he was an abusive relationship, and he was, racist and amoral and everything. And, it's like big differences there between the Disney depiction and the real life depiction, which is why it's, keep them separate. That's why it's like in context of, Pocahontas movies, John Rolfe and John Smith are much better than they actually were in real life. In context of actually keeping it historically accurate, neither of them were very good men. And, it did not go well. They didn't, Pocahontas and John Rolfe did end up getting married, and she took a Christian name because she did get baptized. She took the Christian name of Rebecca. And she kind of unfortunately helped promote his racist ideals, unfortunately, and he called her a dignified savage, and it is not good. As I said, large amounts of historical inaccuracies. Pocahontas did end up traveling with him to England at one point to meet with the king. And I think she met with the king. I could be wrong, but I do think she met with the king at some point. And, they work their way through, there's other things that happen that, of course, I don't know 100% of that. And I'm just kind of going what I found for what the differences were. But they were very much, not good. There was a portrait that was actually based on Pocahontas that was, I think it was a wood carving stamp, I think, that had been made. This is what it is. It was made for I think it was used as a label for like the tobacco company that he had, that John Rolfe had, that he kind of used Pocahontas as the face of. When Pocahontas and John Rolfe had married, her father had given them a certain type of, had given them land, as like a gift for the wedding and everything. And John Rolfe uses the land, to grow tobacco, but he still, he's not a good person. I'm just, straight up, John Rolfe is not a good person. But what ended up happening is, you know, there was a lot of different problems that, of course, happened with that. Them being together is, of course, romanticized and everything, and the Disney movies don't necessarily help with that. But in context of, you keep them separate, of you explain to kids when they're learning history that no, what happens in the Disney movie is not exactly accurate. It's a bit of an introduction to the story, which is not a bad, and it does still have, it's not a bad idea, and it does still teach children that you have to work together, and that learning from both sides is a good thing, but you shouldn't, just because someone's different, you shouldn't assume that your way is better. And so there is that. There are still useful in teaching children that, but then, of course, make sure that later on, when they're in school and such, that they do learn what actually happened to Pocahontas and John Rolfe and John Smith, and how all of that changed. But when they were in England, they did have a son. John Rolfe and Pocahontas do have a son. I want to say his name was Henry, but I could be wrong on that. And she did love her son. And what ended up happening was, unfortunately, before they were supposed to leave for to return to England, or return to to Virginia in 1617, Pocahontas became very sick with, I think it was pneumonia and smallpox or tuberculosis or something along those lines. But she became very, very sick, or she was poisoned, depending on which range you want to go with. She became very, very sick one way or the other. And, and she died in, she died in March 1617 is when she died, at the age of, approximately 21-ish, unfortunately. So she was still quite young when she died. But she had ended up, she did do a lot, not as, happily version of it as what's depicted, but she did do a lot. Her funeral took place on March 21st, 1617, at St. George's Church in Gravesend, which is where she is buried there. And she has a statue that is there, that is a full-sized bronze statue of her, that is the statue was made. It's at the church. It was by William Ordway Patridge. So yeah, there's a lot there for the historical inaccuracies from Pocahontas' side of things. And then, of course, there's the John Smith historical inaccuracies. Of course, as I said, he was quite a bit older than her at the time. Pocahontas did kind of rescue him from, did prevent him from being executed and everything. He did end up getting shot, but it wasn't by Radcliffe. It was, something else that happened. There's a lot of historical inaccuracies, of course, that go with a lot of that. I do think that when Pocahontas did end up going to England, with John Rolfe, I don't remember if her and John Smith actually ever met. But, is, a bit, if they did meet, I don't know. If they didn't, then, I highly doubt she necessarily missed him, but, he did kind of teach her English and everything. The events that he published, in the book that he wrote about his adventures, he was a womanizer and everything and such, and he had many affairs and everything. But the book that he wrote came out, was published 17 years later. When he was still traveling and everything, and it was just more of a way of, getting his name out there and making himself a better, blah, 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 blah. This is what I've done. This is what I've done. Look what I can do. Not good. John Rolfe, of course, he was, very cruel and violent and a hateful man. He was a diplomat, but he also owned like a tobacco farm. He was a plantation owner, and he had slaves and everything. And he kidnapped Pocahontas, and so much stuff. Um, and John Rolfe did end up dying. He was able, he brought Pocahontas to England, and it was not for a diplomatic mission to make peace. John Rolfe turned, Pocahontas into, he used her as like a sideshow attraction. He dignified savage and used it for racist propaganda and everything. And he had the carving and everything made of her. So it was not good at all. As I said, they did have a son. Okay, so the son's name was Thomas. Okay, I couldn't remember what the son's name was. They did have a son. Name was Thomas. And John Rolfe did end up dying. It was just he did die, but his son did end up getting taken back to America, and was raised, and that there were other descendants that the son grew up and everything, and he did have descendants, and there are still descendants around today that are direct descendants of Pocahontas. I think we even had a first lady who was I think that's true. I think we had a first lady that was it was either first lady or like the vice president's wife, that was a descendant of Pocahontas. That can trace her ancestry back through that, which I think is kind of nice. I do, in regards to the music, I think that Alan Menken and Steven Schwartz, who did the music for the movie, I think they did try to at least make sure that they stuck with lots of Native American instruments and such like that they used for the music, particularly for like, Steady as the Beating Drum and such, to depict that and everything. And I do think that they did do research on the different tribes and such. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of those tribes have been very diminished throughout history, unfortunately, because the U.S. does not have a very good track record when it comes to Native Americans. That's a good question. That's I guess a good question of how different would our world be if the settlers, if they had been a bit less violent, a bit less scared of anything new. How different would our world be? Whether or not in your context you want to figure out if that would be a better world or a worse world is up to you. But it's a thought of how different would our world be if that concept of the concept of Pocahontas, that she was able to help things, if she hadn't been able to at least cause some amount of peace between her people and the settlers, how much different, in the context, maybe not that different, maybe a lot different. It's just a thought. I will put a link for the shirt below. Nice shirt. Just same place that I keep getting a bunch of the other ones that have to deal with Disney. That's what we got. The next video would be the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which very, very dark source material in Victor Hugo's novel, but Disney kind of lightens it a bit, which we'll see how that goes. I enjoy the movie. I do like both of the Pocahontas movies. I am able to separate the Disney context for what they do from the real life context, but historical accuracy is important in regards to making sure that children and adults understand the differences and don't always just take, oh, this is what Disney did, therefore this is what it has to have been. But so go read and go find out all the differences that are, what actually happened to Pocahontas. That would be, that's, if I don't usually give you homework, but go and read up on that and see what actually, a little bit more of the differences that actually happens between John Rolfe and John Smith and Pocahontas and her people and all that. So if you want homework, there's your homework. If you don't, then whatever. Yeah. Next up will be Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that's what I got. So I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. Goodbye is an easy word to say, but try saying it to a friend. If I never knew you, I'd be safe, but half as real, never knowing I could feel.